I think Durso's a country guy.
Let's ask him.
I think he is. I've seen him rock the cowboy hat before.
Yeah?
Yeah.
On Facebook pictures?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're now Facebook friends, so I saw those pictures.
No?
No, we are. I saw
yeah.
him on Facebook. We're
No,
Facebook
I think
friends.
he rocks the cowboy hat.
Okay.
I think he's a country music guy.
Yeah, I am too. I like country.
Kevin Durso covers the Flyers for 97.3 ESPN.com, and he joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. The NHL is kicking around a couple of ideas, but first, Durso, are you a country music guy first? Is that your number one seed in the NCAA tournament?
That would be my number one seed. Yes, it is. I actually tweeted a picture out that to get by. Catching up on some vinyl, so I threw up a picture of my Johnny Cash vinyl. So that's my go-to for sure.
So definitely country music would be one. Are you a rock guy? I mean, is there any other, or is like country far and away your top seed?
It's far and away my top seed, but in the same sense, I like Rhodes. I don't have any discrimination really against any type of music. I'll pretty much listen to just about anything. I mean, I'm a musician in my own right. I play guitar a little bit and have for several years, and it's my release from everything else. I'll say it that way for sure.
Yeah, you hockey guys, you're a different breed there, bro.
What do you mean?
Yeah, he's got the guitar playing. He's got the. Are you going cowboy boots? You go that far?
Well, do you work out in cowboy boots?
Come on.
I don't work out in cowboy boots, but I have all that too. I mean, honest to goodness, I'm sitting here. I mean, look, as I'm sitting here right now trying to figure out what the future of the league is for the next few months, I'm also working on making sure my wedding goes off without a hitch, and the honeymoon was for Nashville. So, yeah, we're off to, that's what we're into.
Wow. I've been hearing a lot of people's weddings have been getting hit on the pause button. Is yours getting is there danger of not happening on the date you wanted it to?
So we're not stopping anything from the actual ceremony or anything like that. That's going to go off pretty much no matter what has to happen, even if it's in front of 5 people. But, we'll do everything else may have to get put on hold. So, I'm monitoring it every single day and just going off of it. But I've gotten really, really familiar with the 4 walls that surround me at home right now. So, it's just like everybody else, just hanging in there and doing the social distancing and self-isolation and making the most of the free time I have.
Yeah. All right. Well, I know there is no hockey, but what is the status of hockey right now? The NBA has shut down everything. Like, you can't go work out, practice, nothing. We know there are multiple NBA players who have contracted the coronavirus. There's the first NHL player has now contracted the coronavirus. But what is kind of the state of hockey in terms of where they are right now?
It's not much different than the NBA. It's pretty much everything is shut down at the moment. They put out that the players are free to be able to travel to outside of their NHL playing cities, and they're able to go basically to their hometowns if they would like. Some are staying in the area, some are going home, and basically this is a thing where they're going to basically tell them this is the situation for at least the next 45 to 60 days. So take that time, and it's kind of like an early off season for everybody. It's just a chance to this is your time to get away from the rink as much as possible, and it is what it is for these players right now, and everybody is kind of just waiting for the next step. So right now that's taking this next month and a half, 2 months, and pondering what's to come. But for right now, it's just like the NBA. Everything is kind of status quo and continues to be a waiting game in terms of where we go from here. Okay,
now in the NBA, we've heard a lot of different options of, coming back, playing the games, starting their season in, mid-June, starting the NBA Finals in, say, August, pushing their next year regular season start date back to Christmas Day, because Christmas Day is kind of viewed as the NBA's day. Hockey, I guess their day is kind of New Year's Day with the Winter Classic. So are there any proposals on the table right now for how the NHL will return once they are up and ready to go, based on some of the timelines of when they might be able to get back out there?
Yeah, well, there's 2 sides to this, and it's really no different than any CBA discussions. And we've seen, the NHL lost an entire season over discussions like that. So you have to go between. It's between what Gary Bettman and the Board of Governors works on, and it's what the Players Association works on. The most concrete proposal to return to play that I've seen so far comes from the Players Association in this case, and their proposal is basically to just lay low well beyond the next 8 weeks as recommended by the CDC and essentially take the next 2.5 months off until July. At the beginning of July, the players would get kind of this training camp period to be able to get back on the ice, get back into game shape quickly. By mid-July, you're finishing out the regular season. Through August and September, you're holding the playoffs and awarding the Stanley Cup. And in October, you would have the NHL draft and free agency. And by November, you're back with the 2020-21 season. So presumably without much of a preseason also. Look, if the players are willing to extend this season that long to finish things this year, have a very brief off season, delay the start of next season to make all of this happen, well, then good for them for complying to do this in as fair a way as possible to keep every team that's still in the race involved. Now, I don't know how realistic this is, because I do think that the team that does win the Stanley Cup in that scenario is going to suffer the following season as the result of essentially a 3-month sprint to the finish, a month-long offseason, and then starting another new season right away in November. From Gary Bettman's perspective and the Board of Governors, there's nothing this concrete so far, but here's what we know. We know that Gary Bettman and the league are holding out hope to resume this season at some point and want to award the Stanley Cup the right way by having the playoff competition that we know and love. We also know that Bettman has said that there is an undisclosed date on the table where they see it as a point of no return on this season. Something that I think is important in this is that there is a way to do this in full and make up every regular season game and hold every playoff game, but it's also going to run into next year if you do that, into what next season would be. And one thing Bettman has said to this point is that he wants to give every opportunity to complete this season and award the Stanley Cup, but he doesn't also want to alter too much from next season. So with that in mind, I think that Bettman and the Board of Governors would not necessarily be on board with this proposed plan by the players, and I'm kind of on that side as well. At some point, you have to wonder if it's better to stop thinking about finishing this season and think about making sure you're ready for next season. I don't think anybody wants to see the season delayed so much to the point where you are starting the new season in November, or have this season come back at a time so early on where you're still very mindful of social distancing and you can't play in front of your fans and potentially have to award one of the greatest trophies in all of sports in front of no fans. So I think that there are realistically two primary options here. And one is probably the best case scenario, and the other is the worst case scenario. The best case scenario to me is that you get this season back up and running in a time frame where you can have the playoffs the way you want and award the Stanley Cup the way you want without doing anything to adjust the timeline for next season. You can push back the NHL draft and free agency. You can shorten the offseason a little, but I think you need to have this season completed by the end of August to make all of that work. So as the start date gets pushed back further, you may have to shorten the regular season to let every team, instead of letting every team complete 82 games, make it 75 or 76. You may have to shorten playoff rounds from 7 games to 5 to make sure you can fit this in if you have to. But that makes the worst case scenario loom even larger, and that's just the outright cancellation of the season. And in my mind, that's more likely to happen than finding a solution in the near future. A lot of leagues have already done this. To my knowledge, it's only a small handful of top European leagues that are keeping a return on the table. The AHL has kept a return on the table, and the NHL has. And that's pretty much everything. And the NHL has the ability to work out the logistics and try to find a way to make this work. But I sense already that if you are going to push back to the middle of May at the earliest, the time is already running out. And if you think, and if you find that you can't get this thing started until June or July at the earliest, then you're going to have to be really, really creative. And believe me, it's making my head hurt talking about it in this short period of time with you guys. And I can't imagine what it's like for the people who are in charge, for Gary Bettman, for the Players Association, and what they are trying to do to save this season. But this is where we are right now, and obviously a lot is subject to change and can change in a very little amount of time, as we have seen over the last 2 weeks.
Okay, but what if, and I don't know if this has been discussed or the thought of, if they want to finish this season, finishing this season and then starting next year in a shortened year, like going into that year, hey, we're only going to play 50 games next year. Is that something that could be considered by saying, hey, we have a playoff season still to complete. Let's do that. We'll play it in, August, September when, and finish it then, and then we won't start our next season. We won't play 82 games. We'll play a shortened season. Like, is that something that could be considered if they value playing these playoffs more than an 82-game season?
I certainly think it's on the table, and I think that because everything, I believe, is on the table at this point. The thing that keeps standing out to me is what Gary Bettman was saying about wanting to really alter too much next season. The fact that we can keep kind of coming back to that point, and it makes it seem like the most important thing to try to do is to try to honor the rest of this season the way it deserves to be and have the playoffs the way you want to, while still trying to make sure that there's a potential game plan in place to play all 82 next season, to have the playoffs the way that you expect to the following season. That's what I keep coming back to. So as much as I think everything's on the table, and granted, I do think that as the timeline starts to get shorter in reaching that point of no return on this season, something like that could become a much more realistic possibility, and maybe the stance from one side or the other softens on that, and you go back to, think about the lockout year in 2013, is the 2012-2013 season. They didn't start until January of 2013. They played 48 games in the regular season and jumped into the playoffs, and the playoffs were completely normal at that point and actually did run a little longer than usual. That's certainly another scenario that could be on the table, and I think that will only come with the amount of time that goes by on this. If there's a clear-cut solution, and it seems like, and I don't know that anybody's going to be overly opposed to having to play in an empty arena for a chunk of the rest of this regular season. I think it's the playoffs that they really want to honor the most. I think there's nothing that can really replace that atmosphere, and there's nothing that can replace the way it feels to win the Stanley Cup when you're playing in front of your fans, and I think that's the thing they want to honor the most. So as this prolongs, and if they find a way that they can get back to playing and social distancing rules and things of that nature have to be honored for another month or two, they might be able to still see a way where the Stanley Cup final is being played the way it's intended to be played, and maybe that's enough for them. But it definitely remains to be seen at this point.
See, any other, Broads, any other options? That you're a hockey guy. Any stuff that is not being discussed here that possibly could be entered into the mix?
I don't know. I just feel like this is so random and so unique that it's so hard to really come up with any ideas other than kind of the standard options we threw out there. But I think, as Durso stated, everything is on the table. So I never thought about what you brought up, where they finish this season out and then next season's the one that's shortened. That never really crossed my mind. It was always, okay, how do they shorten
because
this year?
Playing these playoffs and crowning the Stanley Cup, to me, is more valuable than playing a couple of games in November, December, trucking through the regular season. Just play the playoffs, end it whenever, September, October, or the map that Kevin mapped out, and then start your regular season sometime, in, I don't know, February. Or
the only thing I would say that's bad about that is, so then ultimately you're just expecting these guys to come back and then like, hey, here's the playoffs. And I just don't know if that's –
No. Finishing this season as is.
Oh, okay. So you finish the rest of the regular season itself out too. Okay, I thought you meant just like hop in, do the playoffs, and then worry about.
And is that
schedule.
something, Kevin, that you think they want to make sure that they do? Is get these regular season games finished before they jump right into playoff rounds?
I think they definitely want to get some form of regular season finished. And like I had said earlier, I don't know that you even realistically can say play all 82 at this point, but I do think that there's enough teams out there that are sitting there going, hey, wait a minute, we only played 68 games, not 70 like this team did, and they're in a playoff spot right now, and we're not, and we have 2 games we can make up that point margin. You can't just knock us out based on that. And there's teams that are going to say, don't do the points percentage thing because we've played more games. We're going to have at least still have a chance to make up some of those points. Like, everybody's going to have to be able to find a way to finish on the same number of games played, whether that's 82 or 75 or whatever. I think the most that a team has played so far in the league is 71. So it would give at least 4 games back to every team. And those 4 games, maybe if you're a team that's really secure in the playoff picture, that's your extended training camp, and you're playing games where the result doesn't matter. Granted, those results matter too, because you've got teams that are shuffling for position. Think about the difference for the Flyers. They're 1 point out of the division lead still, no matter how long it is between their last game and whenever the season starts back up. And maybe 4 or 5 games is enough time to surpass the team and be the division winner, and you get a wild card team instead of playing whether it's the second or third place team in the Metro, wherever you finish in the rankings. You want to have that opportunity too. So I think everybody needs to be able to finish on the same number of games. So I do think there will be a regular season period no matter how they decide to finish this off.
Kevin Durso, at Kevin_Durso. Read his full piece on the NHL's thoughts and plans if and when they return, what they might look at. They're at 97.3 ESPN.com, and he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. All right, Kevin, take care, pal.
Thanks, guys. You too.